Hi there everyone, it's Mindy from My Creative Scoop and I'm back with another Copic marker tutorial for Ellen Hutson. Today I'm going to be sharing with you how to color this beautiful amaryllis flower. Here is the finished card that I have created, and just to talk a little bit about how I created it, I used some My Favorite Things red polka dot paper, and then I just took some strips of white cardstock and then just cut them off and added some score tape down the center and then just sprinkled some glitter right over that score tape. So let's go ahead and get started. I've stamped my image in Memento Desert Sand and I've stamped it onto my Copic Express It blending card. So let's get started coloring. Okay, so we're going to first start with R37, and I'm going to go ahead and place the R37 in the shadowed areas. So when you're coloring a flower, the easiest way to think of where the shadow should go is it should go on the inside part of the flower, so the deepest part of the flower, and then as it's coming out, it's going to get lighter. So down the center of these petals, there's actually a whitish with a hint of green in the center. So we're going to go ahead and leave those white. So I'm just going right around. And when I color flowers, you can either go, if you're a slow colorer, you can color one petal at a time, or you can color, half the flower and then color the other half. If it's a large flower like this one, I don't recommend coloring or putting the shadowed areas in all of the entire flower and then going back, because sometimes if you are trying to be very careful and you end up taking a little bit longer, by the time you go back to add your second coat, the ink will already be dry and it will be hard to blend. So now I'm going back with my R35 and just blending it out a little bit. We will be adding 2 coats, so that way we can really get those colors moving and blending together. So I'm just going back over and adding a little bit more color and filling in a little bit more of the petal with each new lighter color. And now the same thing with R32. Now for this color, since we are doing the no line technique, I'm going to go around the entire outline part of the petal and leave that a little bit in the center. That way I can have a little bit of a highlight with my R30. So there is a little bit of a jump between R35 and R32, so you might have to go over a couple of times going back and forth to really get those colors moving, so that way there's no harsh line between the two colors. So now with my R30, I'm going to go ahead and fill in the remaining white areas. First you want to get a nice blend right along the edge of that R32. And then I'm going to flick into those parts that are white. I'm just going to give a little flick going backwards, so that way the color looks like it fades. And the way that every time I color something, and especially coloring flowers, I always Google what the flower looks like, so that way I can get an idea of the different shadows and see how the flowers are turning and where I'm going to get the ideas for my colors. So now I'm going back with my R37 so I can re-add those darker shadows. Sometimes when we go over it with the R35 and the R32, you can tend to lighten up those shadowed areas. So we just want to go back and re-add them, as well as adding that second coat to really get those colors moving and blending so it doesn't look blotchy. So again, back with my R35, pulling some of that R37 out. And this is also a good time if you want more of a pinkish color, then you would go a little lighter, or a little thinner. And if you want more of a red tone with just a pink on the outer part, which is what I'm doing, you'll add more of the R32. So once we are all finished with the R32, there may or may not be room for R30 again, since we've already added so much color. But I do want to add a little bit more shadows. So We're going to go, remember, in the center of those flowers, we're going to add a little bit of white and green. So we're going to shadow with N3, just coming up the center part of the flower. And then using N0, we're just going to give a heavy flick going out. So that way it softens up that N3 and goes a little bit further into that white space. And now with my YG13, I'm going back where I added that N3. This is going to give it that little bit of green color, and it looks beautiful with the red. Perfect for Christmas. And then I'm going to just bring it out a little bit more with my G20, so just that heavy flick, bringing out that YG13. And I still have a little bit of white in that center part, so it's just that hint of green. Now we're going to go ahead and go back with our R37, so that way we can finish coloring the rest of the flower. So again, I'm starting back in those shadowed areas. And don't worry about the little parts, the center parts of the flower, because we're going to give some detail after we finish coloring. So again, I'm going to go back with my R35 and pull this color out just a little bit. And again with my R32. So I'm going to outline that little bit right along the edge there and try to leave a small space for the light highlight that we're going to create with our R30. And remember, you'll have to go back and forth a couple of times since there is a difference. There's quite a difference between the R32 and R35. So using my R30, I'm going to finish that little gap that's right there on the edge, and then flick going in towards the center. And back with our second coat. So we're going to be a little more careful with where we are adding the R37 so we don't go into the other petals. Sometimes when you have a lot of ink down already, it's easy to have the ink start to spread outside of the lines. But what's good about that is with using the no line technique, and if you were just stamped regular in black ink, you can easily cover up going outside the line by just going outside the line a little bit more yourself and fixing that mistake. And now with my R32, get a nice blend right along the edge of that R35. And now for the center part of the flower petals, give it a little bit of a shadow. So just a little flick going on each side, basically. And then N0 just to pull it out a little bit more, pull out that shadow. And now to add that little bit of green. So back in that same spot where we added that N3, and just give a little flick so we can add that hint of green. And we're going to pull it out with the G20. So now for the center part, I'm going to just make some little squiggly lines so that way that it looks like there's a lot of different textures inside there. So that way I have that little gap in between to fill in with my G20. We're going to give it some extra shadows, so I'm going to go back and again with just little squiggly lines just to give it a little bit more depth in that texture. And then we'll go ahead and add a little bit more shadows to some of the petals just to really bring out those shadows and add a little bit more dimension. If you were using a black outline instead of the no line technique, I would recommend using a little bit of a darker gray, so maybe an N5. So now I'm going to add a little bit more texture and all the center part of the flower. And adding that red really adds more depth in the center as well, so it looks like it's really deep inside there, like the flower's really blooming. And then these little details here with your white gel pen, I believe, are essential because after you add them, it really, really brings the flower to life. So I added a couple of little flicks and then a couple little circles, half circles, and it just looks beautiful after it's finished. So here I have the other two flowers complete, and it's time to do the leaves and the stem. So I'm going to just take my G20 and fill it in completely. And now we're going to add a little bit more definition to the shadowed areas using the YG13. So right underneath the petals where the flowers are up towards the top of the stem, and then all down below where all of the leaves are coming down in the center. Right here this little leaf is kind of turned, so we want to make a little shadow going underneath it. And then we'll soften that up a little bit with the G20. So just going back over, flicking some of that YG13 out a little bit so it softens it. This way you won't have that harsh line in between the two colors. Now we're going to deepen those shadows a little bit using the N3. So just a little bit of color really goes a long way here. Just a couple of little flicks. And then the YG13, we're going to go ahead and go back over that N3, so that way it kind of covers up that gray and just makes it a darker version of the green. Alright, so again, here is my finished card. I love the way that it came out. I love the red with this light green and those pops of white and the glitter. It all came together so beautifully. I hope you enjoyed watching this tutorial. Thank you again, and I hope you have a great day.